What is up? You are listening to HVAC Masters of the Hustle podcast. And here's your host, J-Dub Moneymaker. And welcome to episode 269. And for all you Spartans, I got to say, I believe we all have a Spartan in us. It's my job, my duty, and my obligation to bring that beast out. And let me tell you all, everyone that is joining on this podcast live on the the other side of the camera on the screens, I got to tell you all, we got a very, very special treat for you all. We got a gentleman that is a legend when it comes to the industry, and he's created something just massive, and I'm super excited to be able to talk about it. Before I introduce him, I want to tell you all a quick story. My first year as a comfort advisor, I was at a smaller company, mom and pop shop out here in Sacramento, part of Airtime 500. And, every time I go to these ring ceremonies on my first year, I was able to do 2 million, and then followed by 3 million, followed by 4 million. But every single time I go to these events, I would see service champions from Southern California. And it wasn't just one rep like me from my company. They had a line of different reps, right? And what they did in that training, or that Airtime 500 success group now, is they would categorize everyone within the nation. And I got to say, his people were all within the first 1 through 10. And so I'm super excited. Let's go ahead and give Mr. Leland Smith a big welcome. How you doing, sir?
Doing awesome, man. Thank you.
Well, like I said, this is an absolute honor to get you into the hot seat, to introduce you to my listeners that, I got listeners from business owners, comfort advisors, installers, technicians. So I know that they could get a lot of value, and I know that your time is very important. So we greatly appreciate it. But I really wanted to start the conversation with, Leland, what got you into the trades of HVAC? Why? Why HVAC?
Well, very strange. I went to the University of Kentucky and I got an accounting degree, and I was an accountant, but my mother's brothers all moved to California and started plumbing companies in Riverside and San Bernardino. And my brother Craig came out and started working for him, and he decided to start his company in 1979. And he asked me to come out and start it with him. So I called Uncle Odie and I said, I was making $10,800 a year. I said, Odie, what would I make if I was a plumber? He said, well, if you're dumb, stupid, and ignorant, you can make at least 50,000. So I figured I'd probably make 25, but that was still twice what I was making. So I came out and worked with my brother for a year, caught a house on fire. Then I started my own company and caught another house on fire, and decided I wasn't a good plumber. I was more of an accountant, inside guy. So from there on, I was more the inside and just hired the guys for the outside. But that's what got me out here, my uncles and my brother.
Okay. So now let's talk about your journey of your success, right? So from the year 2000 to really 2019, what are really some highlights of like the highs of the highs? But then I also want to flip that, and I also want to talk about Leland's lows of the lows, right? And how you were able to go through those points of your life without failing, but learning from your failures, right? And when you fail, fall forward.
Yeah. One of the things that changed me for my life was March of 1992, when I joined a group called CSG that Jim Abrams and John Young had started. And I was very fortunate to have met a guy named Ron McCann, Bill Raymond, Lon Castle, who owns Airtime now. All those guys I was very fortunate to meet. And I learned I wasn't that smart, but if you hung out with smart people, you learned a lot. So from that group, back up to, if you just fast forward to the late 90s, I sold my company to ARS. But when my non-compete was over in March of 2000, I joined Airtime again, that Jim Abrams started again. And I realized I would listen for the guys that were doing really well, listen to the stories. And I'd find them at the breaks. I'd find them at the lunch. I'd find them at the next break. I'd get them out to dinner. And I created from the beginning, and a friend of mine, Kevin Cumberford, he and I would create this group of 5 or 6 companies, but we always wanted to be the smallest company. So if I was 5 million, we had 10, 30, and $50 million friends that we would go out to dinner and talk. And I would ask a question and learn how to shut the hell up and listen to what they were saying to go back and apply it to my company. And throughout the full 19 years before I sold to an equity group, we always had a group of 6 companies, and we would meet every Tuesday. We would share financials. That was the key thing. You've got a lot of people out there that like to talk about how big they are, but ask for their financials, and that tells you how good they are. And so through that whole process, when I sold in May of 19, I was 50 million, but my group was 70, 80, 100, and 120 million. And I learned so much from those guys. So being part of a group or creating friends that are better than you, because you're not going to learn anything if the guy is doing 5 million and you're doing 50. You want always somebody bigger. And I even remember we had a lady that we were looking to acquire, and she goes, Leland, I've heard of you. You're the quiet one. And I was always a quiet guy. I was the one that would listen to these guys talk. So at the very beginning, I think that was the most key thing, is joining back into airtime, getting back with these guys. Because when I started, I was in the office by myself. I was warehouse, I was accounting, I was everything, just me. And Jim Dotson, you mentioned, probably the best salesperson in the country, still with me after 24 years. Just unbelievable what he would do. And I had a couple other people, and it was always surrounding myself with better people. A guy named Jim Cooper came on board, was referred over to me, and then he brought me Gary Arita, and Gary Arita brought me Eric Smith, Steve Smith, Eric Uhart, Frank Spear. All these guys were phenomenal at what they did, but they just never had the opportunities. So it was very, very interesting how we started. And it was all about having great people around me. It wasn't about how smart I was. It was how smart they were. And I was always a really good listener.
I like that you say that, because a lot of times when you get people in a room that are extremely successful, right, or in different levels of success, right, you start seeing egos and everything start popping up. And the fact that I love what you say, right? Don't be the $50 million guy in the room and being the biggest, right? Have multiple people bigger than you, because at the end of the day, if you don't surround yourself with winners and people that are ahead of you, how do you expect yourself to get to that next level, to push yourself to higher states, to understand what's possible?
You learn so much from people that are, when you're 50 and they're 100, you learn so much of how did they get there? What mistakes did they make? And they'll share that, then you won't make those mistakes and you can scoot along a lot better. Just the profit is higher. Everything is about how to keep people, how to motivate people. So it was very important to always have that group that we would every Tuesday have a conversation. And we never had a schedule what we were talking about. Whatever was going on, we would just talk about it. And you might get 3 different answers, but you had to pick out one that fits you.
Yeah. Leland, I got to ask you, when did you learn in your life that the 4-minute mile was possible as a business owner, right? When did you start dreaming big or thinking big, 100 millions, when did that mindset start changing?
It never changed. I know as a kid at 16, I wanted to become a millionaire. I didn't know how I was going to, but I knew I wanted to be. And I was always looking for that way. And Uncle Odie saying, oh, I can make 50,000. That was a start. But you surround yourself with people that are making more money than you. You learn how to do that. And I've always wanted to grow. And I've never been happy where I was. I always wanted to be bigger. I wanted to be better. But I also knew I had to make the people around me bigger and better as well. So it was important that I wasn't the only one that became wealthy. Everybody had to become wealthy.
I
And I'll
love
tell you
that.
a couple of things that Jim Abrams taught me back in March of '92, and Terry Nicholson and Jim, when they started Airtime, was number one was clubs were the most important thing. I would tell people I'd rather have a club member than a $40,000 sale. Because if I got the club member, I would get the $40,000 sale. Because when I sold in 19, 65% of my revenues came from club members. And there's so much there. And even when we started doing plumbing, which we didn't do plumbing when I was by myself, we were swamped with plumbing. All we did was tell our club members we were doing plumbing, and we did 12 million in about 3 years. It was that quick. And the second thing was you've got to treat your employees like family. You've got to pay them well. In fact, I paid them better than anybody else in my market, and I treated them like family. I just treated them with respect. You always hold them accountable, but you still treat them with respect. And the third thing I found out through learning through Jim Abrams, be the most expensive in your marketplace. The cheapest guys are never the largest, but if you're the most expensive, you can pay your guys better than anybody else. And then the fourth one, you have to have quality. You cannot cut corners. And the cheap guys cut corners. They don't put line sets in. They don't do a lot of stuff, where we would do 100% of everything that needed to be done. And the fourth or fifth one, the most important, was the quality work. So they've got to be clubs. They've got to be the highest price. You got to treat your people right. But we had a happy money promise. It was very simple, and we always held true to it. If you're not happy and I can't make you happy, it's free. If it was a repair or something under $1,000 or $2,000, I would just give it to them for free. Then go find out who caused this and fix that problem. If it was a new system, we would tear it out if they wanted to. But generally, if it was a $30,000 system and they wanted to pay 10, I'd take the 10. We would never argue. We would never sue. But we would always make that customer feel really good when they hung up. And one last thing about that was, if you had a call taker, you had a new tech, I would always tell, if you got a customer that's on the phone that's unhappy, never hang up and do what you think is best for that customer. How would you want your family treated?
Yeah.
If that was your mother, your grandfather, anybody you're related to, how would you want them to be treated? And do that. I don't care how wrong I might disagree with you. You would never get in trouble. I might teach you how to make a better decision. But if you would treat that customer like family, you could never go wrong.
I agree with that 100%. That's one thing that I try to implement and teach when I go to different on-sites and everything like that, is treat everyone like they're your family, like royalty, right?
Right.
And when you bring your standards up to like that, the customer experience goes so much further, and I think that's what something you guys do over at Service Champions is, they do really good job at giving the overall customer experience, and Leland, talk about the overall customer experience, because it's not just the service technician going into the house. Okay. It's not just the sales guy going out and happily involving with the system replacement. It's not just the installers, right? Talk about the full circle.
Well, first of all, out of 100, maybe 1 or 2 would ever complain about the price, because they got things that they never experienced before. And this is one thing that we did 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I got tired of hiring techs that couldn't get over the prices we were charging, because they were always working for the cheap guys and they were cut corners, and they just couldn't do that. So when we sold in 19, we had like 300 employees. 280 we trained ourselves. We had a 14-week class. We'd bring them in, no experience at all. And really, we were looking for personality, not necessarily technical. You can train technical, but you cannot teach somebody to have a personality. And we also had no beards, no tattoos, hair couldn't go over the collar. And I was always the last one they would interview. And what I was looking for more than anything in the first 5 minutes, what's this guy like? Personality. I have 2 gorgeous daughters. Would they feel creeped out if this guy walked in? Would my wife buy from them? And if that all passed good, that they didn't creep anybody out, we'd hire them. But it was all about personality, because we can train the technical over and over again. But it was all about having that nice eye contact, communicating well, because that is not the norm within our industry.
Yeah.
And people would just contact constantly. Your guys are so nice. And we had a thing that we started called Good Deeds for Free. We would encourage our guys to go out and look for something that had nothing to do with AC and find something. If they were putting a stereo together or there's a light bulb out or anything that they could look for, they would offer to go do that for them, up to including go to the grocery for an elderly lady who was going to go, but she didn't have a ride to go that day. They'd go to the grocery, pick up what they needed, and bring back. Had one guy that actually went into a house that was on fire. It wasn't our customer. It was down the street, and the kids were running out. Grandma's in the house. Grandma's in the house. And Octavio went in the house, found grandma, and brought her out. Just
Wow.
things like that. That just that type of personality of people that would do things like that. Not just the AC, but they would treat them with that a lot of respect.
I love that you say that, Leland, because the important thing is being different, right? So when I ask everyone what is wow service to them or what is exceeding their expectations, they always say, oh, fixing the problem, finding, giving them solutions. But that's not what I'm talking about because everyone does that, right? They could pick that within a
Right.
60, 100, 60-mile radius. There's 100 different contractors that could do the same thing. But what is it, the wow factor service that they're getting from you that's different, right? Changing the light bulbs, taking the trash. I tell people if you go to an elderly home or a home that you see the backyard and there's weeds around the condenser, it's not just asking or grabbing a weed whacker, but it's taking 10 minutes to maybe go mow their yard real quick, right? That
Right.
is the professionalism that you need to serve your client to the highest level every single time. I 100% agree with that. So important.
Absolutely. It's so different and not the norm in our industry.
Mm-mm.
And always a wow factor. I know they know our staff knows that they didn't handle the customer and it got to me, it was going to be free. But then I would wow them by give them more than what they expect, meaning it might be $100 or $200 gift card to go out to dinner. And I would always thank them for letting us know the mistake that we made because it'll never happen to another customer. And this is one thing we would do as soon as I hung up, I would go down to the call center and find out who did this, bring them in the next day and make sure they know don't ever do this again because it created a problem. And I've never in 40 years had a customer call and complain that they didn't have some reason to complain. We did something wrong and we can always try to get better. And we always would address that. And a lot of companies I talk to will solve the problem with the customer, but not the real problem of repeating that same problem over and over again.
Love it. Love it. Leland, earlier this year, last year, actually, I had a gentleman on the podcast that made a statement that memberships are dead, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like you're a firm believer or disagree with this, right? So talk about the importance of creating a database of memberships and what are the important reasons why you want to have memberships for a business?
First of all, you want your techs busy all the time. So when we're slow, our guys are running 3 calls a day. When we're busy, they're running 3 calls, maybe 4 a day. But the key about your club membership is there's not a house there in California that I couldn't walk in and find something, be it a hard start kit or some UV products. But when we bring these guys out of our training, they're trained how to turn duct leads. They're trained how to turn insulation leads before the equipment leads. And I'll
Mhm.
give you an example. Chris Corin, 14 weeks in the class, came out 9 months later, he made $100,000. He's living at his mom and dad's, and he made 100 grand in 9 months. The next year, he made 135 and bought himself a house bigger than his parents. The next year, he bought a Mercedes and a BMW for his daughter. So the opportunities are huge because that customer is going to be a customer for life. And the key
Mhm.
thing about that is there's always something there. And a good customer being treated well is going to have a neighbor that's going to talk to him about.
Yep.
And we've looked at it, and 15 years later, you're going to change the system out again. But there's always ducts, insulation. And the one thing I will touch on that I think we're really good at, and I actually got some of this from Dave Geiger and from Horizon. We required our guys several years back, every single quote you have, you had to quote a water heater because in California, the water heater is right beside the furnace. And we did that in the first month. We sold 47 water heaters. All we did was ask. And our prices were almost double what most people are. We were not cheap on the water heaters. And now they offer water heaters, water softeners. They do the ducts, the insulation. We have a thing called an attic package, radiant barrier, all that. I don't care what it is. They offer every single one of those every single time. And Steve Smith is a great example. He's been with me for the 24 years. He once told me, I know I'm not going to sell this customer. There's no way I'm going to sell it. They're not going to buy it, but I'm going to practice. $32,000 later, he made a sale because he overcome the fact that what he thought the customer would do, the customer wasn't going to do.
Exactly.
And it's all an attitude. And you've got to go with the attitude that every single time you have to do the same presentation over and over again. And you offer them everything, no matter what they want. You offer it to them and let them decide not to take it.
Yes. I
That's a good reason.
You're absolutely preaching it, Leland. And the importance of being consistent with the process, right? When you are consistent, you have consistent results, right? You don't have those really falling off months. You might have it, but then you'll gain it the following month, right? Things always seem to work out when you're consistent. And one thing that I want to talk to you about is, with such a large team, right? You're talking about offering water heaters or talking about water heaters on every single call. How do you get your team consistently to be able to talk about that and be confident to talk about it?
One way you get their attention is their bonus was tied to it. They had to sell 4 water heaters a month, and they had to sell 35,000 of insulation every month to earn their bonus. And had one guy named Frank for a year, he never offered insulation and never got a bonus the whole year. Then he said, all right, I'm going to offer it. And he sold the heck out of it. We're selling 100,000 a month because he didn't realize people would really do that. But you got to hold them accountable, and you've got to, keep the other teams busy. You got to keep your installers busy. You got to keep your plumbers busy. Another thing I was going to say about the clubs, I don't think I said, when we offered plumbing to our customer base, I think I did mention that, it blew up. We didn't advertise for plumbing at all. We just told our base, our club members, we were going to do it. In 3 years, we were well over 10 million in plumbing just by telling our base that we're doing that.
Yeah, I love it. And that's what I always say is, if you're adding on to your company, right, there's no really necessarily reason to go throw all this marketing dollars away. Tackle the database that you have and let them know.
Yeah. I always tell them every club you sell is 2 tune-ups we don't have to market for. And they're average around $250 a tune-up. So there's $500 every club you sell that the company saves in marketing. And you've got a good customer, because they're not going to invest with you and spend the $19 or $21 a month to have you come out if they really don't think you did a good job or really are committed to you. And you really have got customers for life.
Yeah. Quick question for you, Leland. What does the compensation plan look like for, your comfort advisors, your technicians, your installers? Can you kind of break each one of those departments down?
Again, I said that we wanted to make sure we paid better than anyone else. So in our market, a maintenance tech would get 3% for turning a lead. We started paying 5%, and they started selling well. In fact, our biggest sale was a $172,000 sale, and the guy made nearly $10,000 off turning, just a maintenance guy. Now, so that they would make that, they'd get a percentage of revenue. I think they get like 20% whenever they sold a repair, but most of it came from turning those ducts and insulation leads, getting 5% of that. And that's where Kristen made his 100,000 in 9 months. Most of our guys who graduate from the class will make somewhere between 90 to 100,000 their first year, and they will grow as a service tech before they start selling up to 200,000 by just turning equipment leads. And then our installers, they're paid by task pay. I'm a firm believer you don't pay them by the hour, because the companies I've seen, if it's an 8-hour job and he knows there's no work tomorrow, that 8-hour job would turn into 16 hours. They would drag it out by the hourly. So what we did on task pay, if it was an 8-hour job, we would pay them 10 hours on a task pay. And these guys would get it done in 6 to 8 hours. They would get it done much quicker. So we very rarely have backlog. Even our busiest time in the summer, we might have a day backlog, not weeks backlog, because these guys would do it. But they also were tied in to callbacks. They couldn't get their bonus if they were more than 2% callback. So every 100 jobs they did, if they had more than two of them have a callback, they would lose part of their bonus. Comfort advisors, we had two levels. We had, I call them no charge, but market leads, people that have never used, so they're calling in just to quote, and you know they're gonna shop you. Those guys got a higher bonus and a higher percentage. But our basic guys that do the customer base, our comfort advisors, we had 5 systems and we would pay 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16%. And each one had four drops in each one of these systems. So Jim Dotson is a great example. He would rarely ever give a drop. So when he sold a top end system at 16, he'd make 20% on that job alone. And that's where Jim, and I think you had another guy on there that he made $1 million last year.
Yep.
He didn't sell $1 million. He made $1 million himself, selling a little bit over $7 million. And it's just unbelievable that these guys can make that. And we don't have customers complain because our installers, our top installer made $220,000 last year. He's awesome at what he's done. He's been with me for 18 years. The next average guy is about 150, and the new guys are making about 100 coming up. So again, we firmly believe in paying well, but we hold them accountable. They've got to do quality work, or it's not going to work out for us. And Jim is a good example. When he makes a mistake, I always tell people, I tell him how great he's doing. Then I get done. What in the hell were you thinking? Cuss a little bit, get his attention. Don't ever do this again. But damn, you are the best in the country, man. So I'd build him up, get my point across, build him back up again so he understands I'm serious about it. And that's how we kind of motivate the guys. And that's pretty much the pay system.
Yeah, I remember Jim Dotson, you know, when I was part of Airtime 500 10 years ago, 9 years ago. That was a great challenge, and it was great because I got to see what was possible, you know, and that's what's really good about these different training groups or organizations is a lot of times they'll keep, you know, the nationwide numbers, and it keeps everyone competitive. And I love the competitive spirit of everything. But one thing that I want to transition to real quick, Leland, is when I was working at Bell Brothers 5 years ago, before I took this leap of faith, right? Um, you brought over to Bell Brothers, or I should say Service Champions brought over to Bell Brothers channel managers. And I was running the channel managers. I'll say we were the guinea pigs, I guess, me and a couple of the other guys they chose. And so it was new to me, right? And it was something that was a really good logic because it keeps people focused in the mindset of work, right? Instead of going home. And then you have a team of technicians under you where you get to talk and train them. But you've been able to really perfect this. So I'd really like your expertise of where did the concept channel managers come from and what's really their responsibilities?
Yeah. I don't know if other people were doing it or not, but there was one morning that I asked where Jim was, and he said he's home. I said, why is he doing home? It's 10 o'clock. And they said, we didn't have a lead for him. I said, no, never again will he be at home at 10 o'clock. He is going to be in front of a customer somewhere. And Barbara, who's been with me for 30 years dispatching these guys, she would find the best call that didn't have a high turning guy on it. And Jim would be out there maybe 10, 15 minutes after he arrived. And he was just a supervisor, just looking. And he would just be looking for what to do and be teaching the guy how to turn the lead while he's turning the lead. And then it got to a point that, as you said, the channel manager concept came in where they've got 2 or 3 guys, and they would follow those guys constantly, teaching them how to turn leads to make them a better service tech turning leads. At the same time, we didn't have a lead, so we created our own leads. So none of our sales guys ever would be sitting at home at 10 o'clock in the morning. They were always out in front of that customer somewhere. And we just would pick the best possible call that was there.
Now, when you have the channel managers real quick, and say I'm a comfort advisor, I have 4 technicians under me, am I rotating those technicians every quarter, every 6 months, or are they on my team for life?
No, we would try to rotate him every 3 to 4 months because he should have trained him at that time and had that guy well enough to go out on his own and train. Then they find the new guys coming up, constantly training them. And that's one thing we always did. We trained every morning, Tuesday through Friday. There was training going on. And I've seen companies that don't train at all, but we were installers, maintenance techs, service techs, salespeople. Every morning they had some form of training going on because I would be involved in some of it, but I would never train. I would ask, who didn't sell yesterday? Why didn't you sell? What was your
Yeah.
problem? Then I'd look at Jim or somebody else. What would you tell him to do? How would he do it next time? And same with, why didn't you turn a lead? What was your challenge? And we have tech training techs constantly. And that made such a big, big difference when a tech is training a tech, not a manager trying to train a tech who hasn't been out in the field for months, if not for years, or in my case, ever.
Right. I agree with that concept and training, right? And talking about, bringing your team together every day or a couple times a week, right? And communicating the failures of the calls, just like you said, Leland. What'd you run yesterday? Why didn't we happily involve that homeowner with whatever it was? What was the objection? And what would you do about it? And you point someone else to do that because, again, if I continue to say something and preach it, right, it only goes so far. But everyone always says, as me as a trainer, they're like, man, you come out here and I promise I tell them the same exact stuff. But when you say it and you leave, all of a sudden it like clicks with them. I'm like, sometimes they just got to hear it from someone else.
Right. And the key thing is the managers that you're out training, they have to carry it on. Too many
Yeah.
times I've seen people go to classes, and the second somebody leaves, like you or Weldon Long, or any of those guys leave, it stops. They just don't do it anymore, and they don't hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And it's really that manager is your problem. It's not your tech. The manager doesn't know what to do or how to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. How is company culture? That's something that's really important. But Leland, how do you protect your culture in your company or within your space?
Well, the thing I mentioned earlier, we want everybody to feel like family and be treated well, but we never let people get away with something there, or Jim would get away with something and I would hold somebody else accountable. Everybody was held accountable, and they all had the same opportunities, and they all had the same opportunity to grow or to go up to the next level. So the key thing about all this is just you got to treat them like fair. You got to treat them like family, and you just got to show respect. And I was there every day. I'm a 6 to 7 day work guy back then, and I'd be there at 7. I'd be there in the meetings, and they all had my phone number. They could call me at any time if they got a suggestion or they thought I was wrong. I'd listen to it. Most of the time I was right, but every once in a while I was wrong. But I would listen and I would change it. I would never not listen to an employee if they had a better idea.
I like that. I
But
like
it was just a good, happy thing. We would do our celebrations. We'd do our kickoff for the summer. Anything that we could do to celebrate a success, or if we hit, our $10 million month or $1 million day or whatever it is, we would celebrate that and show everybody that everybody has something to do with it. The one thing that salespeople forget sometimes when they go out on a sale, what happened before that for that to happen? Who marketed, who answered the phone call, who built the value, who dispatched the tech out if it's a lead, who installed it properly, who took care of any issues afterwards. And they forget there's so much going around that I see people that will leave us at time and start their own company. I had one guy, and about a month later, he called me and goes, "How do you make the phone ring?" Now, that's pretty bad if you don't know how to make the phone ring and you just started your company. But
right.
that happens sometimes. They don't know the back end, how much work people do. Give you another example of it is, some people would say your marketing's not working. But if you listen to the call taker, you're finding the calls are coming in. The call taker is not building value, not booking the call, or they build a little value and they book it, but the customer keeps on calling and look at how many they book compared to how many cancel.
Yes.
So whenever I hear people say marketing's not working, I always ask them, did you listen to the call? Are they saying the right things? And there's several things I believe a call taker needs to do. One of them, I call it a politician answer. You don't have to answer the question. You just got to talk afterwards. So when they ask you, how much do you charge to come out? Well, great. What city you live in? No, I just want to know how much you're coming out. Well, I need to see if I've got a tech close by. I might be able to save you some money if I know where you are. How old is your system? And who's your normal maintenance company is a big one that it's hard to get them to do it. And they, well, I don't have one. Oh my gosh, you don't. We are the best maintenance company out there. Make sure when Bob comes out, you ask about our maintenance program because it will save you money. And everybody recommends you do it. The electric company, the manufacturers, they all do. And the final one is if they say, I'll just give you a call back, you've got to end it with a strong statement. Go, you know, Mr. Smith, I understand you're going to call around. Just let me know. We got the best guarantees. We have a happy money promise. You can never lose with us because if you're not happy, you don't have to pay. Are you sure you don't want to go ahead and book this call today? Those type of things you want to hear in the call taker. And if you hear that, then you got a marketing problem. But if you don't hear that, you got a call center problem, not a marketing problem.
Man, that was absolute gold right there. I mean, that if y'all didn't take nuggets from what Mr. Leland just said, I mean, that right there is game changer to analyze, right? And look at what your dispatchers are doing because that is a very, very important role. And to look at the analytics too, like he's talking about how many calls are coming through, how many calls are canceling. Those are very, very important numbers to keep in front of you and let your team know what those numbers look like too. You know, as we're ending this, Leland, I wanted to ask you, who's been I know you've talked about, you know, people that's mentored you and people that you surround yourself with, but who's really been like the biggest mentor for Mr. Leland?
You know, it's always been a combination. Don Comerford helped me early on. Bill Raymond up Northern California.
Yeah.
I don't. Bill still around. Ron McCann was a big one. Lon Castle from Airtime doesn't remember it, but my first night at CSG in 1992, he took me aside with Ron McCann. I was only about 3 million at the time with my first company. And he said, you have a gold mine here. And he just showed me what I was doing because I wasn't selling systems. I wasn't selling clubs. So it's been a combination of people. And, you know, up to, you know, just when I sold Horizon, Dave Geiger, Mark Aiken were a huge influence on me because I'd go out and they were the 120 million. But I will tell you, I pissed off Dave once. At least I heard this because they were 100 million. I was 50 and I was making the same money they were. And he couldn't understand how a company half their size was making the same money he was. But I was listening to him. I was learning from him.
Yeah, you gotta work
I wouldn't
smarter,
say
not
there was
harder.
one. I would just say there was several throughout my career that I was always looking. And like I said, when we got to be the biggest in the group, we moved on to a different group to learn more.
I
But
love that.
I'd say that the mindset's got to be, I'm not that smart. There's smarter people out there. Go find them, be friends with them, take them out to dinner, buy the best possible wine you can, ask questions, and shut up and take notes.
Love it. That is absolutely mic bombs dropping right there. I just gotta say, Leland, thank you for being a guest in the hot seat. You know, this is an absolute honor. And I just gotta say, man, congratulations to you and all your success. I mean, everything that you've done for me to be a part of the industry and what you've been able to grow, right, within the nation is just absolutely amazing. So I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for the trades of HVAC and keep leading like a example. Keep bringing everyone to the top of the mountain with you, brother.
More than welcome, man. Anytime.
Take care. Until next time, y'all. God bless. Take care.